Here we go again. I might be wrong about this, but the warrior set was just added to the PTR. Last week I wasn't really able to purchase anything from the tier vendor on my warrior, and the DH set just really didn't exist. But with the latest build, we can finally start checking out these sets, and in this video, we're going to break down the Prot Warrior set, check if it's working, and see what type of synergies that we can come up with to make this set shine. Let's dive in. Jumping right in, the 2 set reads, Shield Slam deals 15% increased damage and reduces the cooldown of Last Stand by 1 second. During Last Stand, these effects are doubled. We can ignore the first part of this effect. Shield Slam is just a main part of our rotation, but a 15% damage increase is pretty straightforward. It'll have some synergy with some talents like Crushing Force or Brace for Impact, but this is going to be pretty minor when it comes to synergies. The second part of this is a pretty standard cooldown reduction effect, and the first thing that came to mind is pairing this with the Bolstered talent. This is located in the spec tree in the second tier, and it reduces the cooldown of Last Stand by 1 full minute, and it gives you shield block for the entire duration, which is 15 seconds. So basically, I wanted to see how much this tier set bonus would knock off of our normal 3-minute Last Stand, and then how much it would knock off of the Bolstered Last Stand. With the 2 different cooldowns, we're actually going to see less reduction on the 2-minute CD before it's actually back up, but even if we can get this down to like a 1.5-minute cooldown or less, or in that ballpark at least, that would just be insane. I was too lazy at this point to actually fully import my UI, so I just quickly created a weak aura for Last Stand to attempt to track it. What's cool about this set though, is while Last Stand is active, each Shield Slam will actually reduce the cooldown by 2 additional seconds instead of 1. So our goal ideally would get maybe 4 to 5 Shield Slam casts, though that's really highly dependent on procs. With this test, we were able to get our regular Last Stand down to a 2-minute and 7-second cooldown. Now obviously with this being a training dummy and not really using cooldowns, this can definitely hinder some of the results. Either way, we're going to use this as a base. Let's swap to Bolster and see what we can do. I was able to reduce Last Stand to 1 minute and 26 seconds, which is a 25%-ish cooldown reduction. Technically, not playing Bolster will result in a larger percentile reduction of the base CD, but getting Bolstered Last Stand down to a sub 130 is great. I'd like to take that further though. I was also running some odd talents like Heavy Repercussion, so I swapped that to Into the Fray for additional haste in order to hopefully get more shield slams off. We also have Battering Ram, which increases attack speed, in turn, more procs of shield slam through Devastator. It might not be optimal, but I wanted to test it. With this setup, we were actually able to knock an additional 10 seconds off, making Last Stand just a 1 minute and 19-second cooldown. Now, Last Stand is a defensive cooldown, so why does this matter? Well, that brings us to our 4-set bonus. For 10 seconds after Last Stand ends, Shield Slam unleashes a wave of force, dealing damage to enemies in front of you and reducing damage they deal to you by 5% for 5 seconds. This is pretty straightforward. After Last Stand ends, you're going to deal AoE damage through Shield Slam, and any target hit by that wave will deal less damage to you for a few seconds. For the most part, this effect will be pretty passive, but in Mythic Plus or multi-target scenarios, it will be important that you're aware of where you are positioned and the way you're facing. This set is actually acting as a slight extension of the defensive buff, while also acting like a Counter-Strike style effect. For 15 seconds, you're going to have the effects of Last Stand, or Bolstered Last Stand, granting you 30% maximum health, and possibly the increased rage generation if you're playing certain talents. Then, when it expires, you're going to gain a new buff, which is causing your Shield Slam to cleave and make targets do less damage to you. When it comes to the damage by itself, you can see on our training dummy test that it only did about 4% damage in single target, but this again is going to be slightly skewed because I didn't really use abilities like Ravager or Thunderous Roar, or even Avatar that consistently. Let's check out this set at the AoE dummies in Valdrakken though. And then just for reference, after a 2-minute test and 2 uses of Last Stand, the tier set did about 8% of my damage. Now, with Mythic Plus being enabled, I really wanted to take this set to the test track. We headed over to Freehold and we started doing some solo pulls in a level 15 key. Now at this point I quickly grabbed my weak aura package from Live since it'll help me track my abilities and buffs and whatnot. Going into this, my major concern with this test was simply that the dot that gets applied from Poisoning Strike is going to be too much workaround. Sadly, there isn't much of an outplay when soloing, since even if you stun these mobs during their cast, they're going to just immediately recast it. Luckily, it can be spell reflected, but being able to actually drop the debuff is extremely difficult to do. Though, jumping forward a little bit, this poison was actually dealing the majority of the damage to me. Warriors are basically immune to physical damage between Shield Block, Ignore Pain, Leech, and Impending Victory, but this pull was challenging to solo as a warrior. I understand that Bitter Immunity can be taken, but unfortunately didn't really hold up because the stacks added up quite quickly. In an actual key setting, you can either have a Dispel in your group, or you're going to have 3 DPS to just kill the mobs before it actually gets deadly, or you'll have a healer to heal you. Anyways, the main reason we're here is to really test how much this damage the Force Set will provide, and mostly the uptime that we can get on Last Stand. With our first test, I definitely made some mistakes. I dropped Shield Block plenty of times, and I was also just like sitting in battle stance, but if we pop open details, we can see that the Force Set bonus did about 5.5% of my damage, though I will say that the pull only lasted about a minute and 40 seconds, and we only casted Last Stand once. Let's try this again to see if we can improve our survivability and maybe even the damage from the Last Stand 4-piece. The next pull we were able to actually last much longer, closer to 3 minutes, and I was able to defeat one of the 9 mobs. In this scenario, you can actually see that I was able to get 2 uses of Last Stand pretty easily, and the damage actually was more impressive this time around, mirroring the training dummy test from earlier. It seems like, looking at the timeline, that we can regularly get 3 casts of Shield Slam off during the Force Set buff window once Last Stand ends. We also have the chance to get 4, which I think would be optimal. You can try to optimize this a little bit by holding certain cooldowns when Last Stand expires, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily worth. Originally, when I did begin testing the set though, I thought maybe the Force Set won't even be worth due to the damage modifier of the Shockwave. I figured Thunderclap might just do more damage. Luckily though, that's not the case. Even while running Show of Force, the Shield Slam Frontal does 15% more damage than a buffed Thunderclap. Now, whether you optimize it or not is the name of the game, but it seems like the set is ultimately going to be more valuable in Mythic Plus. Alright, I wanted to get one more test done and change up some talents. Up to this point, I was running Spell Block, which really wasn't helping me, and I was running Battering Ram for more procs, but I felt like my Shield Block uptime wasn't that great, so I dropped that for Champion's Bulwark. I was able to get this pull down after just 3 minutes and 49 seconds. My uptime felt pretty great, but Last Stand was only 13%. I realized that I actually ended up sitting on the cooldown for quite some time after reviewing the footage. It came up again a little after the 3 minute mark, but honestly, with how close the pull was to being done, I just forgot to hit it. Also, I forgot that I defeated one of the pirates during a previous pull, so this was actually only against 8 targets instead of 9, which I felt like invalidated the test a little bit, but the point wasn't to solo the trash pull, it was really just to get a numbers in a setting that is a little bit more dynamic than just hitting training dummies. I tried this a few more times with Fortified enabled, but it went as well as you might expect it would. At the end of the day, I think the set is pretty unique. Anyone who knows me knows that I love a good cooldown reduction playstyle, and the Protection Warriors are known for that. With frequent procs and resets, reduced cooldowns, and even just straight up cooldown reduction through things like anger management, the warrior already has an extremely fast-paced and enjoyable playstyle. This tier set, at least compared to some of the other tank tier sets, I think heavily favors Mythic Plus. The damage in single target from the Force Set is quite dull, and the rest of the set is just an increase on Shield Slam damage. In AoE scenarios, I like the notion that if you're paying attention to when Last Stand expires, and you line up your CDs just right, you can get a ton of damage from this set. Especially if you hit the 4 Shield Slam Dream inside of that 10-second window. Also, it's pretty reminiscent of BFA Prot Warrior, especially since we're returning to Freehold. Bolster was the preferred talent back then, and I'm now curious to see if it makes its way back into the meta for Season 2. Anyways, I know I can easily sit here and talk about this tier set for days, but I don't want to bore you. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you like the set, or do you hate it? I've already tested the DH set, and I can't wait to talk about that in a future video, so if you want to see that, make sure you hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when that gets posted. Anyways, Patreons, thank you so much for the support. I truly love you guys, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.